summer, my son and I took a vacation to Ukraine after he saw a documentary about it and became obsessed with all things Ukrainian. One day, I wandered through a market in Kiev, brimming with local goods, embroidered blouses, and fur hats, and I stopped dead in mid-stride when I happened upon an entire stall of little old lady house dresses with snap buttons down the front. I took a photo and I sent it to my sister. Look, a whole kiosk of Mama Trini dresses. Mama Trini was our grandmother. She was a tiny woman, shorter than me even when I was 12, with a tight little home permanent that she never allowed to go gray, and perpetually clad in Kmart slippers and one of those house dresses. These garments are not uncommon or exotic. I was able to procure some of my own right here in San Diego when I had my first baby and I had to stay home all day whipping my boob out a lot. And apparently these are also a go-to for Ukrainian grandmas. But for my family, they are and forever will be Mama Trini dresses. Another thing we attribute to my grandmother is the slow, draggy walk you usually see on people who recently got hit by a car or are otherwise convalescing. That's the Mama Trini shuffle. My kids have warm memories of their grandmother, my mother Celia. But even though I was 12 when Mama Trini died, I can't remember a lot of good times or warmth from her. No hugs, no I love yous, no cookies and milk, and certainly not the tea parties that my mom held for her little grandkids. My brawny 16-year-old, 6-foot-tall son remembers loving the mini plastic tea set his grandma would put out for them and all the treats she'd give him on the sly when I wasn't looking. My daughter recently broke down in tears when we drove past Mom's old house, which we sold after her death. "It's not fair," she said. "I was only 6 when she died. I didn't get enough time with her." I don't know what that's like, to love a grandmother like that. I never considered myself close to Mama Trini, even though she looms so large in my family history. I don't even ever remember her saying anything that I could understand because she never learned to speak English in all of her decades in the US. And I didn't really learn to speak Spanish until after she died. My mother adopted a sort of English-only policy when she came to this country due to the fact that if she spoke Spanish again for any length of time, she would forget a lot of her English and would have to work extra hard to catch back up. Celia tried so hard to lose her accent, even resorting to Pygmalion-like elocution lessons with a professor friend of our family. It was futile, and thankfully so, because her accent was wonderful and so indelibly a part of who she was. One of her famous lines was about her disdain for Antonio Banderas and Melanie Griffith as a couple. "He come to this country and he married the first floozy he find." She was not a fan. I was well into elementary school before I discovered that the word is headache and not headache. H-E-D-I-C. Celia often declared there were only 2 words that she could not pronounce, and those words were murder and turtle. Murder, and turtle, turtle. There were native English speakers who, over the years, would beg to differ that those were the only 2 words that she didn't know how to pronounce, but they did so at their own peril. I learned Spanish from Rosa, whose kids I would stay with every day after elementary school until my mom got home from work, and from sporadic trips to Guadalajara and Mexico City to visit family. But I didn't really get fluent until I became a social worker for the welfare department with a 50% Spanish-speaking caseload, the same job my mom had before me. And nothing teaches you like immersion, which is why my mother was anti-bilingual education her whole life, and she gave no fucks that that was an unpopular opinion. The only English words I can recall from Mama Trini are when I was little and I had to use the bathroom. She asked if I had to catch pee-pee, pronounced queche pipí. But besides the tenderness of her helping me to the restroom, I was pretty scared of her. A lifetime of smoking gave her a raspy voice that just sounded angry in perpetuity. As a child, I spent a good deal of time in Mama Trini's home in National City. And even though she was always there, my memories are of me alone, roaming the halls, feeling like I was snooping. There were photographs all over the walls, so many people I didn't know from back in Mexico. All black and white or sepia-tone pictures that may as well have been stills from Pedro Infante or Maria Felix movies. One was a bridal portrait. I asked who it was, and my grandmother told me it was my mother and her husband. The husband was not my father. I was 9, and the way I know that is because of my trusty Hello Kitty diary from 1982. Apparently, it was also fair weather that day, because this is information that Hello Kitty asked you for on each page. That day, I also wrote, it was Mimi's dad. If it was Ricky's dad, too, then that means I'm the only one with no brothers or sisters. Like I was adopted. I still love her, my mom. I just don't understand. It was such a bombshell. And yet I never brought it up with anyone or ever asked my mom about it, because there was a lot I didn't understand. Since all I knew of my siblings, I had to glean from these little anecdotes that were deemed suitable for me at the time. Like, Moni had polio as a kid and had a lot of surgeries, and that's why one of her legs is shorter than the other one, and she walks with a cane. And Letty got her teeth knocked out by the piñata stick when she was little, and that's why the 4 front ones are fake. And she was so tiny when she was born that she could fit in a shoebox. Carlos and Mimi once got their heads shaved and covered with cow saliva because it was supposed to make their hair grow back curly. So this was just one more thing to add to the list. My biological father was only my biological father, no one else's. Mama Trini died when I was 12, and it was almost anticlimactic after a lifetime of telling people she was dying. Perpetual convalescence was kind of her deal, and she was the type of hypochondriac who started out perfectly healthy, but through sheer hard work and determination, eventually made herself as sick as she believed herself to be. This was accomplished by many years of trips to the pharmacy in Tijuana, where the word prescription is just a fanciful term that means very little when actually coming to procuring any sort of drug under the sun. She was always treating herself for a host of illnesses and playing it fast and loose with the pills. And if you do that long enough, when you weren't really that sick to begin with, or perhaps weren't the best at self-diagnosis, because this was before WebMD, your body does not respond well. As a result of growing up with Mama Trini and her interminable imaginary illnesses, upon which she completely obsessed, my mom developed an intense aversion to hearing or speaking about health issues, any kind. Sick people, legit sick or not, need to just, shut up when they're talking about that stuff. Nothing ended a conversation with Celia, or sometimes a friendship, faster than idle musings on the state of your upper respiratory system. So who does she marry? My stepdad, who, according to her, he's been dying for 25 years. If he had chest pains and we expressed concern, she would wave us off with an eye roll. He has a heart attack every time he doesn't want to have Thanksgiving dinner. I guess you could say that after a lifetime of Mama Trini's often dubious illnesses, sympathy was not in Celia's wheelhouse when it came to her husband. Mama Trini's funeral was the first time that I ever saw a dead person, and it completely freaked me out. It could have been anyone, though, and it would have been terrifying. And I think that made me feel even more upset, guilty that my tears were more from fear than from sorrow. Before the service, my brother-in-law, Gary, he made me go up to her body in the open casket. And when I say he made me, I mean he physically guided me up the aisle of the funeral home with his hand on the small of my back while I cried the whole way. He did this like he was hip to the concept of closure or something. But my family does not trade in psychobabble, and this is a white man who uses the N-word freely and without apology. So I have no idea why he thought it was so important for me to see Mama Trini in that casket. I stayed far away from the front rows of any open casket services I have attended ever since, except for my mom's funeral in 2011. They didn't have to physically force me up there this time, but I looked away immediately after I saw the stiff smile her face had been arranged into, which looked nothing like an expression I had ever seen on her in life. I heard murmurings about how lovely her makeup was or how peaceful she looked. I decided right there and then to be cremated. I've worked very hard to erase that image from my mind because I prefer to remember my mother vibrantly and ferociously alive. Fortunately, I have 39 years worth of Celia memories to choose from, and they easily supersede that brief moment at her funeral. But I wish I had known Mama Trini better. My siblings are all much older than I am. 12 to 24 years older. And they all have so much brighter and more loving impressions of her. I guess Mama Trini wasn't always the sickly, housecoat-clad, aspiring invalid that I knew. Because I recently heard the story of when my sister Mimi broke her arm as little more than a toddler in Mexico, and my mother lost her shit, in the worst way that a mother can. Celia, the total badass of my childhood, was rendered useless with panic, and Mama Trini was the one who scooped Mimi up and sprang into action. I can't picture it. But everything about my brothers and sisters' childhoods was so wildly divergent from mine. 5 kids in 1950s and 60s Mexico with their mom getting beaten by their dad regularly and no indoor plumbing. Versus little old me in 70s and 80s San Diego with a badass Viva la Mujer single mom who had overcome all that shit. Safe to say, they didn't grow up with the same mother that I did. I am so much like my mom. It is ridiculous. But maybe I'm like Mama Trini too, and I just don't know it. She was little, and she could be a bit scary. And I know a few people who might describe me that way. But even if I end up 80 years old with a tight-ass Miss Clairol perm and a Mama Trini dress, I have a feeling I'll also have the tea set waiting for when my grandchildren come to visit.
It's her first time on the VAMP stage, Jennifer Campos.